The next game we'll be reviewing in the Jak trilogy is Jak II, and I thought it'd be a perfect time to review it since we did Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy last week. It's kind of fitting to start up on some Jak II. Jak 2 basically starts out with Jak and the gang after the first game, once they defeated Gaul and Maya. They got this riff ring, which was in the 100% ending. And basically the beginning of the game seems normal. They start off, just chilling there. They're getting ready to test it on this rift gate to see where that leads. To their shock, when the portal started going on, a lot of mysterious things were happening. The portal floated up, and this weird beast came out of the portal out of nowhere, along with a bunch of metalheads. This is very important to the plot later because it's going to have to do with why the main enemies in the game are here. And I'll probably get into it more into this review, so if you don't want to get spoiled, I wouldn't watch on because eventually I am going to start spoiling the story here before we go on to the gameplay and whatnot. After they were going through the portal, they ended up landing in some weird, mysterious city that seemed very futuristic for what it was. And, with that confusion is where the adventure starts, because these red guys, or the Crimson Guards, and one of their leaders, Errol, basically has them beat up Jak and put him in their prison. Yeah, Daxter was gone for 2 years. That was a whole adventure he got as well. But for the last 2 years within the game's universe, they've been experimenting on Jak, and that changed him a lot throughout the game, including his personality. So rather than being a mute character, they basically made him, as you could say, very talkative character.
I'm gonna kill Praxis!
I hope.
You look like a reasonably smart man. I want information. Where the hell am I?
Sorry.
I want the Baron to know that it's me who's hurting him.
It's a strike on the...
Hey, we kicked the Baron's ass. Unfortunately...
Yeah, just from those examples, you can obviously tell Jak is super edge. I'd be lying to you guys if I didn't love it, though, because, while sometimes it is funny how, dark it does get, I do think, personally, in my opinion, I really enjoy the gritty story that you see throughout the game. Because it has a lot of twists and turns as you go through the game, and, you meet a lot of different people, like Torn, for example, Crew as well, who is, shall we say, a very interesting character. And a lot of these characters have a big point in the plot because they help Jak to get to his goal of defeating the Baron. So basically, he does all these jobs for these people to get information on the Baron. Like he'll talk to the mechanic, who is Kira, to basically get access to the palace. He talks to Crew because he has underworld connections to the Baron, so he'd be able to give out secret information that only some top Crimson Guard person would know, for example. And he also works for an underground too, which is a renegade group against the Baron within the city. And there as well you do missions for them. So they're all linked somehow to the story, I'd say, which is really nice. I'd say the first major point in the story is when they find out that Samos's hut is in the world that they're in, and they realize that it's not an alternate universe or some kind of weird dimension they're in. They actually come to realize that Samos's hut, or that their world, is in the future, or that the world they're in is. And as well as that, the person that they've been trying to seek this whole time turns out to be a younger version of Samos, so that confuses them even more because, again, you'd think if they're in the future, why would there be a younger version of the one guy that they met? They seem to think that it's him throughout the game, though, so perhaps that wasn't, their thought process, and they just thought that he forgot or something until, the plot gets further into that. Next plot point involves Mars' tomb. Basically, throughout the second act, they start looking for, artifacts relating to Mars' tomb that they need. And again, like the first act, that involves a bunch of missions you got to do to get them. Once they get into Mars' tomb, they have to do the test of manhood. There's two of them that they have to do, and then they basically get to the end of it. An interesting thing about one of the tests is that's probably one of the few sections where you actually play as Daxter in the game, and it's a throwback to Crash Bandicoot in a boulder-style chase sequence. Now, once you get to a certain point, you have to fight the Baron, and after you fight the Baron in the third part of the tomb, he basically takes the stone. And now this is when the plot gets serious, because not only has the stone been taken, but your friends have been put behind bars within the game. So that's where Act 3 comes in, and you find out that Torn basically ratted the whole underground out, basically to help Ashlyn. So it's presumed that he had good reasons, but of course everybody was upset at him about that, because now Jak and Daxter have to go back into the prison to basically save everybody in the underground who have been captured. Once in the prison, you finally find the future Samos, the one that you've seen in the first game. And, of course, a lot of the questions come in because the plot does get very out there with a lot of time travel. So this might take a bit of explaining, so, give me a second to do that before we continue on. Because the plot line is, like, very out there. Basically, you have young Samos, you have old Samos, and the boy that you've seen, like in the game, is actually a younger Jak, also in the future. And at the end of the game, you have to fight the Metalhead leader, and you find out that's when you find out about that. And once you find that out, you have to fight the Metalhead guy, and then you find out that the whole reason for going home is now gone because now the younger Jak and the younger Samos need to go there so Jak can be prepared to fight the Metalhead leader. Alright, now with the major plot lines out of the way, I think now we could start talking about the gameplay. So, your gameplay's the same as the first game, like when it comes to the basic moves. You have your punch, you have your spin, you have your jump, of course, because it's the platformer, you have your little, what do you call it, like your punch up. You have all that. But now, you have new moves. You have guns this time, which I'd say almost kind of replaced the eco, because like each weapon kind of has an eco color. Like you have the scatter gun, which I guess you could say is kind of like a new version of the red eco, because it's got a big punch to it, just like how the red eco did. You have the blaster, which I mean is obviously just a replacement for the yellow eco, almost. Basically in gun form, which is something I haven't really thought about. Just like when I give it like another look. And the Vulcan Fury, which is blue, is kind of based on Blue Eco if you think about it, because it's a machine gun and it shoots the bullets really fast. And the Peacemaker, which is very deadly, very dangerous. It packs a big punch when you use it, almost similar to Dark Eco. Another move you have, which is probably like one of the major things, is Dark Jak. And basically, with Dark Jak, you can basically wreak havoc throughout the whole game and destroy shit. It's really fun to just blow everything up in the Dark Jak mode, honestly. Because it's just really addicting to do. Sadly, it doesn't really last for very long, and eventually you'll run out after a few seconds. With enough Skull Gems, you can actually upgrade your Dark Jak powers by going to the Oracle. And you'll get stuff like the Dark Bomb, the Dark Blast, all kinds of stuff like that. And a lot of the powers are mainly for like big explosions, but they're fun to use. Thing you can go ham with too is the Jet Board, which is basically a Tony Jak pro skater. And you could skate on rails. You could basically like go in deadly water that you normally couldn't go in certain places like Dead Town. And, it's a pretty fun device to use. It's kind of finicky at certain parts, I will admit, but there's something about it that can be fun if you're willing to, I guess, get the hang of it. But I'd say, like, out of all the new stuff, the Jetboard, while it's cool, does have a lot of issues and it is finicky. So I'd say all of the like the new additions to Jak's main character, the Jetboard's probably the weakest one, but it has a lot of use to it, and it's still a fun thing to use. So a nice addition, Naughty Dog. I kind of wish they would have worked on it just a little more. aside from the jet board, you'll also be making use of hover vehicles like the Zoomer. You got these bigger cars, which actually have a different effect. So, like the smaller vehicles, when you hit something like at a certain rate, it blows up easier, but it goes faster. The bigger ones are a little slower, but if you hit something, you'll normally only get a little bit of damage, so you're at less of a risk of dying. Like right there, it doesn't really do much for you. You can also make use of the Crimson Guards vehicles, which basically has its own gun. So, have fun with that, I'd say. The worst vehicle type is definitely not the hoverboard, but the worst one to me would definitely be the mech suit. Now, while it's cool in concept, it's very, I wouldn't say janky, but it's very stiff to control. And when enemies are shooting at you, it's almost impossible to get them. And sometimes you have to like actually get out of your suit if you want to shoot an enemy or take them out. So it makes the mech suit very stiff to use. Sometimes jumping doesn't work either because you have to be very specific with your jumps. And the way you jump with the mech suit, it's kind of hard to be specific with it. So that I think is probably the lowest point in the game as like an addition is the mech suit. It doesn't work for me. And while it was cool in concept, I think they didn't really utilize it all that well. So I'm happy they didn't like overuse it because, it needed working for sure. And just like the Jak I list, I do want to talk about the environments as well. And let me tell you, boy, does this game have environments. Probably my favorite area is Haven Forest because it's a very beautiful section of the game. There's also the mountain, which is like right before Haven Forest. The industrial city has a very dark feel to it. Baron Praxis Palace has a beautiful viewpoint. All that kind of stuff is amazing. And the environments are very varied. Maybe not as much as the first game, of course, but it has a unique amount, I'd say. Like there's the drill platform, there's the strip mine, there's like an underport area, there's so many areas in this game, and they're all beautiful. A lot of them are very dark looking, and Haven Forest is probably one of the few examples where it's not. But I still like the feel because they all, even with like the similar dark feel, have something to them that's different in my opinion. Just like in my previous review, I'd like to show off the music because the music in this game, just like the first one, because it's done by the same guy, is very good. And I think if you give I'd say 3 tracks instead of whatever I did before a listen, you'll probably like it. Because I really like it and it sounds good. In some ways, it's better than the first game even. Well, that was about it for the review, everybody. Now, I know what people are probably wondering. Retro, do you prefer Jak 1 or Jak 2? And the answer really is, I don't know. Because they're both such different games. And, like, they have, like, the gameplay is kind of similar, but they both have a very different style to them and very different, in some ways, music, too, and, like, when it comes to the weapons, the gameplay is slightly different as well. So it's hard to compare what feels like two very different games, you know? And in a way, I don't have an answer for that, because some days I prefer Jak 2, and some days I prefer Jak 1. It really depends on how I'm feeling. I will say, though, that just like the first one, Jak 2 is also a masterpiece. And, you know, you should also try it out if you have a PS2, PS3, PS4, and a PS5. I never say Vita because that's a bad port. Anyways, though, thank you guys for watching this really long, rambly review. Or I guess not really long, but this fairly length review of Jak 2. I'll probably be doing Jak 3 next week, so be on the lookout for that, gamers. See you all in the next video, and I'm out. Peace.